Okay, so Rose, I figured out a way to do this. I've been doing recording for an online course that I've been doing, and I use this program called Screenwriter or Screensaver, something like that. So I'm going to record my answer on that. It'll show you what's on the screen there, which is my website, personal website. So I figure between the website and what I have to say, you should be able to be fine. I've also lost your questions. I've looked in Gmail and Ymail and Fordham, and email is just a real problem. I'm gonna have to close this window. I live in the Bronx. Email is a problem because you can never find anything when you want it. And technology is a problem, actually. And I could talk about that for a long time because there are a lot of people that praise and worship at the technology altar, and especially with education. And the thing I have to tell them all the time is that it's a tool. It's not a replacement for doing research or thinking or doing work or the hard stuff of going through material and reading it and understanding it. So anyway, all right. So I got into teaching not because of any lofty idea, but for two reasons. One is selfish, in that I identified that thing that I thought I would be good at. So it's about really one of the things about teaching. Teaching is very complicated, I think, and one of the things about it is that you have to identify, the first thing that you do is you have to identify who and what you are. So if you find that teaching or standing in front of people or explaining or trying to tease out details of reality and truth, if those are things that are your skills or gifts, your charisms, then teaching is a possibility for you. And people all through the years, you girls were small, I wasn't in teaching, but I used to do teaching kinds of things like workshops and seminars, and people would always tell me I would be a very good teacher. So I went into teaching because of that selfish interest to figure out what my skills were and then to use them in the best way I could. And then I had to figure out what level, and I wanted, because of pride, I figured I'd have to be a professor. I can't be anything less than a university professor, you know. So then I had to go back to graduate school to get a doctorate. So that's what that was about. The second reason for my going into teaching, it was not selfish so much as just a realistic assessment of that I had failed at well, I didn't fail at everything, but I tried different things before that, and none of them quite seemed to work. I wasn't quite sure what else to do. And so that's another way of arriving at truth, is through failure. You learn a lot about yourself and who and what you are. So I got into teaching, did that. At the same time, I was attracted to religion. Your mother and I started going back to church. So we took the family, and so religion was always something that interested me because I thought it's the only thing that really makes any sense in the world, because the rest of it, I'm not going to fall into the abyss of nihilism or this sort of existential despair, you know, of nausea. I'm not going to do that. It's ridiculous. So, which is Jean-Paul Sartre and etc. and company. So, religion was the area, teaching was the method, and so I pursued it and went for that, and spent a long time trying to learn the craft. It's very difficult. Teaching is very difficult because you have to figure out who you are, which could be a lifetime. And then you have to figure out the material. You have to learn there's a body of content. You can't just say I'm going to, it's all about method. I mean, method is very important, but you have to have some kind of content. You have to be able to give some body of knowledge. You have to convey something. It's not all just about process and transformation. So there's the content that you have to learn. And what's interesting about that is that the content that I learned. Well, religion, I did. I mean, I practiced it. You know, I both in ministry and in our personal lives, right? But also in ministry, professionally, I worked for the church, the bishop. So I practiced it. But now that I'm in business, I'm in the business school. You know, I've never taken a business course. I'm in business, you know, myself with a small consulting firm. So in that way, I'm in business. But I never took a business course, and here I am teaching in graduate business school and undergraduate business school. So you have to learn the content. And then the third thing is that you have to know your audience. You have to know the students. And that can vary wildly. I mean, on any given day when I was at Santa Clara, I would be teaching undergraduates in the afternoon, and that evening graduate students. Very different groups, very different experiences, very different needs and approaches. So, and that's very complicated, and you can't be all things to all people. So you have to figure out what's going to be the best way to convey the material in your way so that they can understand it or approach it in some way. You can have the event of meeting together over this material that's going to be challenging to them, so that you don't dumb down the material. You want it to be challenging to them and fulfilling for you, because you can't constantly be doing things that increase anxiety and the sweat factor. You know, you can't just, you got to be able to do this in a way that's going to be nurturing. So I find it very it's very hard. As far as like a teaching philosophy, I used to be all about transformation and about, you know, not providing so much content, but transforming people and change, being a change agent, etc. I don't think that anymore, because I think that's a lot of I think that's actually Marxist. I mean, I think there's, you know, there's this Marxist struggle for undermining the dominant paradigm. You know, you know, the dominant class, the oppressing class, the oppressors. You have to be able to. You can't accept their classical content, so you have to throw everything out because it's oppressive, and so you've got to throw everything out. And the entire time that you're in teaching and you're learning is geared toward societal transformation and personal change, right? Or societal change and personal transformation. And I think that's a load of crap, because what happens is you're left with nothing. There's no upward mobility for you as a person. There's no true learning in an academic sense, so that you become a better person, you become more noble, you learn things, you understand history. So I think, and it's an individual, there's development of conscience, you know, particular virtues. So I believe in truth. I believe that there is a truth. I believe that teaching ought to help people get closer to that truth. I don't think it's relative. And I don't think the main task of teaching is to transform society. I think it's to help individuals become more human. By that I mean virtuous, in the Aristotelian sense of virtue as being those things that ennoble the human spirit, you know, so that you can be a better individual, and being more virtuous, you're a happier person. So there has to be a sense of history. There has to be a sense of independence. There has to be a sense of, as well as collectivity. I mean, it's not as if you're doing this alone. You're doing it as part of a community of people concerned for the polis, for the city, for the, you know, the political nature of being human. And so there's that concern. And I would say that teaching does need to do, one of the things in a very practical sense that I've learned is it needs to, when they get to me, I need to undo everything that's been done before, because everything that's been done before has not been for the benefit of the individual student. What I see is most teaching that happens, or the result of most teaching by the time they get to the university, is that these students have been beaten down, forced into become cogs in a machine, in a wheel, and that wheel is the educational system. So that education has become a system. It's like, in a sense, it's like capitalism. Capitalism is a system of subsystems, bureaucracy, hierarchy, in which truth doesn't matter, but correctness matters. You do things the correct way as opposed to the true way. So what's the correct answer? That correct answer may not exactly be true. You see this with passwords all the time, you know. What's your password? We'll answer these security questions. Well, that's really where I went to school, but that's not the correct answer. That kind of thing. Education is the same thing, in that these students have learned how to be good students. And I told my class this the other day, undergraduate ethics and business class, which we spend a whole time on, my virtue ethics. I mean, I talk about Aristotle in a contemporary context, not just purely classical. We talk about this idea of the idea of being independent, so that you're in an educational system. They're made to be students. Well, the point of education is not to create students. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, the end result of education is not to be a student, and it's not to get a job. I mean, I go back and forth about this. I think on one hand, you need to be very practical about the kinds of education that you have so that you can get a job. On the other hand, you can't just be job focused. That's training. That's not education. And I think that's what the powers that be want, because they want a sort of a dumbed down workforce that is trained to do things like, you know, medical record management and dental hygiene and computer codes and programming. You know, well, those are all things machines do. Those are machines. So we're moving people to be from people, human beings, into machines. We're training them to become machines. Education goes the other way. Education takes the machine that people have become and gives them back their humanity. Education is the effort to give back humanity to people. And when they come to me, they're trained. They're trained. They're machines, or maybe trained monkeys. They're students. They know how to be students. Unfortunately, they don't know a lot else, like grammar or basic history, or, you know, ask them where Serbia is. They may think it's a bakery, or even just rudimentary math, things like that. You have to be able to have these skills. You have language ability, the ability to write. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but Daniela writes much better than a lot of my juniors at Fordham. I think the biggest problem regarding that is that students don't read. They don't read. People don't read. And I'm not talking about, you know, Proust or James Joyce. I mean, I'm talking about, like, read any book. Read an airport novel, you know. I mean, people don't read. They I don't know what they do. Well, they do video games. I mean, I see this on the train all the time. We're creating a class and a society of idiots, really, who are. I mean, they're now coming out with coloring books for adults, and this is, you know, completely acceptable. You know, the behavior of adults is juvenile. Their attitudes are juvenile. Their tastes are pathetic. I was at Macy's and I made the joke of somebody wanted to buy these pair of jeans. I said, I can't sell those to you. He said, why? I said, well, they've got holes all over them. They're ripped. That's an expression of undermining the paradigm, undermining the tradition. It's very Marxist. It's very Marxist. I mean, there's been a Gramscian, Antonio Gramsci invasion of education from the 30s. I mean, this comes from the Frankfurt School, from the people of the Frankfurt School. And I'm not into, these vast conspiracies theories, but on the other hand, the Frankfurt School were people that were involved in the early intelligence efforts on the part of the United States government. So they come here to change the educational system. That's what you do. You change the educational system because they lost the military. Soviet Union lost the military conflict with us. Anyway, it's getting a little off task, but it isn't, because now everything is geared for what's so-called critical thinking. Critical thinking is anything but that. Critical thinking comes down to what are the ways in which we can tear down, make fun of, and destroy the past, and replace it with coloring books. So and lies, just lies. So I hold students accountable to a high level. I want them to know classics. I want them to be able to think. I want them to be able to communicate. I want them to be able to turn off the way that they relate to the world, which is if the world were just a large television set. I mean, how many times do I think I'm on TV in the classroom? They just stare at me. I want them to be able to become human beings, and that's my job. And it's a job that, if I put it in these terms, people don't understand. People, so-called educated, I don't know what an educator is. I still don't know what an educator is. I think it's somebody in administration in a school setting. I don't think of myself as an educator. I'm a teacher. I mean, teacher is one of the most noble, highest things you can call somebody, because there's also intimacy. The teaching action and experience is intimate. It's intimate. You become, because they have to open up. You, in a sense, you penetrate their openness. Oh God. But it is because of the vulnerability and the trust that has to happen. And you have to be very disciplined and now about not violating that trust. And violating the trust could not be anything conscious or overt, but it could be passive. This coming from somebody that married a student, so it gets complicated. But I'll say that there is a gradual, slow, steady dumbing down, I think, of people. I mean, the other day I said in class, I asked them about John Locke. You know about John Locke because you studied philosophy. John Locke and his ideas related to the French Revolution is this idea of liberty and freedom, individualism, the basis of human rights, the basis of the American Constitution. They had no clue. They had no clue. I mean, maybe they thought it was a hardware store on Arthur Avenue. I don't know. So it's scary that way, particularly when students don't seem to even care about this. I was on an MBA retreat. This is an MBA retreat. This is the end of an MBA program, Masters in Business Administration. And I talked to this group, and very little engagement. The most engagement the entire weekend of this retreat was when they were playing some type of charades game that involved celebrities and celebrity names. They know all about that. And these are, people in their, 30s and 40s. I don't know any celebrity. I mean, I wouldn't know Beyonce if I ran her over. Of course, I couldn't because I don't have a car. But there. I think those are your questions. This is 20 minutes into it, so that's what I think about teaching. That's how I got into it. I'm much better off now, I think, teaching part-time. The two worst things in teaching are The second worst is grading, which I do mainly because I'm very particular about it. I spend a lot of time in grading, and I give a lot of feedback, and I spend a lot of time, at least once per person, going over grammar, style, voice, things like that, and the technical aspects of writing, because they need it, and it's awful. The worst thing, of course, is faculty meetings, by far. Thank God I don't have to go to those anymore since I'm not full-time. But there it is. The best thing about it is that I get to have an opportunity to really change people. And even if it's one person. And I know that sounds a little cliched. I never thought I would say that, but it's true. I have an opportunity. How many times, how many places do you have an opportunity to be able to really affect change and have people open to that, and at least there, and most of them ready and willing to listen to something? It's not often that happens, so I find that as a blessing. I think that's it. Do I want to say anything else about... Oh, love. I think that is the whole point to all this, is love. It's about love. I mean, the basis of being human is love. And that's what teaching is. Well, I had a professor at Catholic University who said, he was a Franciscan priest, who said that at the beginning of every semester, when he gets his new roster of students, the first thing he does for his class is he sits down and he goes through that list. In the silence of his room, he goes through that list and he prays for every one of those students. Doesn't even know them, but he prays for them. I think that's good advice. Okay. I think that's it. I hope this will work for you. Good luck. God bless. Love you. Dad.